Gnosticism, one of the theories is that that is a form of Platonized Judaism. Well, I don't think it had much of Christian doctrine at all if it hadn't come out of Zoroastrianism during the exile, where usually scholars say that Jews were influenced by Zoroastrianism, which they encountered during the exile, and thought, hey, this Ahriman thing, that would be a pretty good way of getting God off the hook. Let's change Satan, God's agent, into the arch enemy of God, like Ahriman is to Ahura Mazda. But it now looks more like, you know how it says that Ezra was a scribe in the service of the Persian government, and that he came back to the Holy Land with the law of God in his hand and so on. It appears more likely to me and to some others that basically the post-exilic religion of Judaism is a kind of Judaized Zoroastrianism, and that in fact the Pharisees, the major ones that adhered to all those doctrines, a future Messiah, resurrection from the dead, Satan as the enemy of God, an elaborate angelology and so on, that these guys were called by the Sadducees Pharisees, denoting Parsees or Persians, that they were the heretics, but they had more esteem among the common people. And the Sadducees' power base was in the temple. When it was destroyed, the Pharisees pretty much filled the vacuum, and that became Orthodox Judaism. But if not for Zoroastrianism, there'd be no recognizable Judaism, Christianity, or Islam, because all of that is fundamental to them. You don't have the resurrection of the Old Testament, and I mean, barely you do, but that's in very late post-exilic material, so there's almost all of it comes from earlier things, and that's what is the problem with that? I mean, even theologically, if you say God is not without his witness, no pun intended, then and the Greek Orthodox Church viewed it this way with Platonic philosophy. They said, well, this guy was a Christian before Christ, like Justin Martyr said about Socrates, and he was working with these people, and so when that enters the river of Christian theology, you know, why not? What's the problem? God was at work there. Well, I don't know why you couldn't do the same thing with the mystery religions, with sacramental salvation and all that. I don't see what the problem is. And in fact, Gnosticism, one of the theories is that that is a form of Platonized Judaism. So what the heck's the big deal seeing that in the New Testament? So if you try to just strip out it's almost like a theological ethnic cleansing. You're trying to get rid of everything. What do you want? Ancient Israelite religion, like back in the time of Samuel or something? I mean, would that be the true religion? It just seems to me you can't. It's like, I've had just like the wheat and the tares parable. If you get rid of all the tares, you're not going to have anything left. You'll have destroyed the whole thing. And that's so common to all biblicists that they have that approach. The hell thing comes from, in all probability, from the geography of Sicily, with its hell mouths, the lava pits and fumaroles and volcanoes and so on. It looks like that imagery for a bad afterlife originated with Sicilian Neo-Pythagorean philosophers who fanned out all over the Mediterranean preaching, and that's where that came from, because there's no fiery hell of punishment in the Old Testament, right. And it never comes up in the Pauline epistles. Yeah. It's funny when people say that. Jesus, boy, he was gentle Jesus, meek and mild, but Paul, oh, what a fierce character. No matter who you think wrote them, the so-called Pauline epistles never mention anybody going to hell, whereas Jesus is made to say, oh yeah, you know, Hades. But that brings up the soul thing. Jesus says, I'll tell you who to fear. Don't fear those who only can kill the body and can do nothing after that. I tell you, fear him who can cast both body and soul into Hades. What's that supposed to mean if there's no soul? I grant there are Bible passages, New Testament passages, that speak of the dead as those who are asleep.
Right.
And that would suggest to me the soul sleep or conditional immortality or whatever you want to call it. But there's...
Which was the Jewish idea before Zoroastrian came in, right?
Apparently, yeah. Though they also seem to have adopted the Babylonian idea of Sheol, which is pretty much the same as the Greek Hades, just a kind of a eternal dingy bus station that you weren't being tormented or anything, but you were just warehoused there.
Yeah.
And but that may just have been a metaphor for being dead, like like Psalm 90 and Genesis 3 presuppose. You're just dead, dust to dust.
Right.
So, I mean, if it really mattered that there was an afterlife and the prospect of eternal torment, don't you think we'd have heard about it back in Old Testament times? A big surprise in store. But it certainly, hell is not even universal in the New Testament. I already mentioned Paul, but is there a resurrection of the wicked? Well, according to Acts and Revelation, yes, but according to 1 Corinthians 15, apparently no. The resurrection simply means salvation. The wicked are dead. Christ comes to raise those who are his, and that's the end, it says. So you just can't assume that everybody in the single early church had the same views. What that's doing is to refashion the past as a model for what you want the present to be.
Yeah.
And it's always been that, because you have to be an idiot to read the New Testament and get the idea that all Christians agreed. I mean, look at the epistles. Oh, these guys have made shipwreck of their faith because they believe this about the rest. It's just ridiculous. And of course, the next step is to posit an authority structure back then, a magisterium or something, that the apostles wouldn't have allowed these ideas, these heresies to grow up. That's just like the historical Jesus apologetics thing, where they say everything it says Jesus said and did in the Gospels, he did because the apostles would never have allowed the tradition to be polluted. What were they? Were they a bunch of? It was like Snopes.com. Were these guys? Did they have anything better to do than constantly, as like the federal revenuers, go into every village where there were Christians and listening in and taping what they said? I'm sorry, Jesus didn't say 80 times, you got to forgive him 70 times. And it's just ridiculous, and it's just a way of saying, yeah, they always believe what we believe. And unless you got a time machine in your garage, there's no way to verify that. And even then you couldn't cover all the ground and talk to everybody.
Yeah. Wow, you covered most of my remaining questions there. That was excellent.